Okay, so I want to welcome everybody and thank you so much for joining us tonight for this voter information session at this very important time of year. My name is Jessica. I'm with the Chelmsford Public Library, and we will be kind of like hosting this on Zoom for you. And we are very fortunate that the League of Women Voters and the Town Clerk's Office chose to approach us for this program because we think it's very valuable and very important information, and we definitely want to get it out there. So I'm not going to take up too much time here. I just want to say that I'm going to turn it over to Mary Frantz of the Chelmsford League of Women Voters, who is going to be in conversation with Jennifer Almeida and Maria Vasquez of the Town Clerk's Office. I'm also going to share a couple of links and their contact information in the chat. If you have any questions during their conversation, their question and answer session, please direct those to the chat and we will try to get to them at the end of the session. And if you have further questions afterwards, I will share their contact information and you can contact them after the program. And this program will be emailed out to all of the people who registered and will be made available on the Chelmsford Library's website. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mary, very much for joining us tonight.
Well, I thank the library for hosting us, and I want to thank Maria, who is our new Assistant Town Clerk, and Jennifer for agreeing to participate and answer the questions. So with no further ado, let's get to the questions. And I'll start with, why do we have new precincts in Chelmsford?
Sure. So every 10 years after the federal census has been conducted, re-precincting and redistricting needs to be done to keep up with the changing population. And there are things to take into consideration when those changes happen. So for example, each precinct cannot exceed a certain number of people, which I believe is 4,000 per precinct. So that's the maximum number that you can have per precinct. So Chelmsford needed to add 2 precincts due to our population growth and to have a cushion to allow for growth over the next 10 years. So we went from 9 precincts to 11 precincts.
Okay, terrific. What, who drew the lines for the new precincts?
Sure. So it started with review by the state census division, and then they met with us to discuss the lines, our town's population increase, which over the last 10 years was 7%, and also discussing how we wanted the precincts to make more sense geographically. And so we kind of took this as an opportunity to renumber them, like the order on the map. So we submitted proposed lines for the state to review. They had something called the Special Joint Committee on Legislative Redistricting. And so after that, they then proposed to us, based on what they reviewed, they proposed to us 2 different models. So one was a 10 precinct model and one was an 11 precinct model. So we chose the 11 precinct model for a couple of reasons. And for example, this model allowed us to minimize the number of possibility of split precincts to allow for growth over the next 10 years. And also to keep the number of town meeting reps below 180 because we can't go over 180. And the new order, using the 11 precinct model geographically, it just made more sense.
Okay, you brought up a couple of things that I know I have questions about. And I'll point out, we have the precinct map in the background behind Maria. Yep. And you talked about split precincts. And I've noticed on the map, that there are sections A, B. I think there's one of the precincts it says in C also. What are the split precincts? What's that all about?
Yeah, so That is a question that a lot of people have, and so the reason for that is, as well as the re-precincting, you also have to redistrict. And so then when you get down to the districts, you also can only, you have to have a certain number. And so with re-precincting as well as redistricting, that is the reason for them having to split the precincts, is that so you're getting the certain number per district. So our new precincts 3 and 5 needed to get split so that they had the adequate number per district.
So that's we're talking about state rep districts. So again, for example, 3A is in the 2nd Middlesex, currently represented by Arciero, right? 3B is in the 16th Middlesex, currently represented by Tom Golden. Remember that their districts encompass much more than Chelmsford. Mr. Arciero also represents Westford and Littleton. Tom Golden's district includes Lowell. Down here, this is all going to be the new 14th Middlesex, which also includes Acton and Concord and Carlisle. So we're taking those populations. Again, these districts also need to have the same population. So Chelmsford, chunks of Chelmsford go into each of those. And the unfortunate thing is that, part of the precinct 3 is in 16th Middlesex, the other part is in 2nd Middlesex. So this only is going to matter in state elections. This has no implications whatsoever in local elections. In local elections, everybody's in precinct 3 represented by the same town meeting reps. Everybody in precinct 5 is in the same precinct represented by the same town meeting reps. It simply means that part of precinct 5 is in the 16th Middlesex, represented in Boston. The other part of precinct 5 is in 2nd Middlesex. And same with precinct 3. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, that's what I was afraid it meant. And I'm just thinking what that means when it comes to voting in elections that involve state offices, because it means that for a particular precinct, which 5, one of them that's split, it means
five and three.
It means you have to have multiple ballots available in those precincts, because depending on where people live, they will get one for whatever a state district they're in. And that is one heck of a lot of confusion and work for people working the polls, and certainly for you in the town clerk's office. Was there no way they could get those things so they corresponded, or draw the precinct lines so they corresponded, so we didn't have this split precinct problem?
So the town clerk and the town worked extremely hard to avoid anything like this. What was presented to us, this was the best option that was presented. And so between our town manager and our select board and our board of registrars, they pushed really hard for the best case scenario. And it's just that what we got is what we got. And so if anybody does have questions about that, we also wanted to note that the town manager's office did put out a very nice summary of this whole process. And if anybody has further questions about how the re-precincting and redistricting happened, that they should contact their state representative.
Okay, do I understand correctly that we are represented now in three state districts rather than the 4 that we had before?
That's correct.
Okay, we have, and we're still represented in the same state senate district. Okay,
yes,
so
third Middlesex still in Michael Barrett's.
Currently Mike Barrett's district, and
that district did get redrawn a little bit further south, but nothing changed.
But nothing affecting us. Okay, and the 3 representatives in current, with sort of overlapping, and for Chelmsford would be Tom Golden, our
so technically, right now we still have 4 state reps, right? So yeah, but again, Tom Golden's is still in 16th Middlessex, Jim Arciero is still in 2nd Middlesex. We still have Vanna Howard, who represents only precinct 4, but but that's, and then Tammy Govea is the rest of sort of the South Chelmsford.
So which one goes away? Okay.
The one that precinct 4 has always been sort of all by itself out there getting it, the only one that only had the only precinct in that district.
Okay.
So after as of like for the September primary, November, and then going forward, everything south of 495 is in the 14th Middlesex.
Okay.
And that's a seat that's like Govea is not running for re-election, is my understanding. So that's the open seat in the, so that's all gonna be one. But again, and it's large, it has a lot of people, but it's again combined with several other towns that have relatively small populations, which is why it kind of makes sense.
Okay. I just, as I said, it strikes me as it's gonna be a really nightmare for people in those split precincts when it comes to the ballots and all of that.
So that is something that we're aware of. And we already are used to multiple ballots, particularly in state elections, primaries to be more specific, because you're voting in, because you've got different parties, right? It's not just one ballot. So we're already used to multiple ballots. So we have that on our side, and we have excellent poll workers. And so the ones who are working in those precincts, I mean, we just have excellent poll workers to begin with. And so the ones who are working in those precincts are going to be aware of that as well. That on top of that, they are going to be aware of now even more multiple different kinds of ballots.
Okay. Good luck. On to the other thing. I understand there are also changes or an increase in the number of polling places. How do those work out?
Yep. So we have 3 polling locations now. Did we used to only have 2?
Yep. Well, yes. Since 2014, we just had 2 polling locations.
I've been the assistant town clerk for 4 months, so I'm familiar with what is happening now, which is that we now have 3 polling locations. And so the new precincts 1 and 2, which are up at the top in North Chelmsford, the new precincts 1 and 2 are voting at the senior center. And then precincts 3 through 8 are going to vote at the McCarthy Middle School. And precincts 9, 10, and 11 are going to now vote here at the town offices in the gym downstairs.
So how are people going to be notified?
Sure. So the town clerk is really good at keeping our website up to date. So she's been updating the website as well as news flashes since all of this drafting has been taking place. So not only on our website, which by the way, you can get notifications for. So if people didn't know this already, you can go onto the Chelmsford homepage and there is an icon that says notify me. And you can pick which alerts you want to get, and they can go right to your phone or right to your email. And so anytime, if you choose the town clerk and elections ones, every time the town clerk makes a news flash, that alert will go to your phone or your email, however you choose to receive it. And we are actually mailing out the census to every household, which happens every year anyway. And a lot of you may be aware that the census mailing is quite delayed this year. And that is because we had to wait for the state to update our database with all of the new precincts and polling locations. And so we didn't want to send out forms with information that wasn't going to be correct in another month or 2. So we, as soon as the state updated our database with the new precincts, is when we sent the census to print, and that is getting mailed this week to every household. So the census form, which Jennifer has here, is going to say your new precinct right in the top right corner, as well as big and bold on the other page, that you are now in this new precinct And then you can check the key to see what your polling location is. And in addition to that mailing, we're also mailing out postcards to each individual voter that will tell them their new precinct and polling location.
So everybody will have that before the town election.
Exactly.
So those who don't look at the town website will have the information via this means. Terrific.
Yes, and then I also like to tell people not only can you navigate things such as like anything to do with your voter registration on your town's website, but you can actually use the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website to check the status of your voter registration 24/7. So not only chelmsfordma.gov, but you can utilize the state's website, which is sec.state.ma.us. And right on the homepage, the very first block on the Secretary's homepage is elections and voting. I believe it's red. And when you get into their elections page, there are all different boxes and features that you can use. And one of those features, I believe it's titled, "Am I registered to vote?" And that tells you if you are registered to vote, where you're currently registered to vote, and what your precinct is and what your polling location is. The only piece of that feature that might not be quite up to date yet is the district updates of your state rep, like who it's going to be.
Terrific. So now we know we're in a new precinct. We know our new voting location. What does all this mean for town meeting reps and for the election of town meeting reps?
Yeah, so with the addition of 2 new precincts, Chelmsford went from 162 town meeting reps to 165. And so every seat is up for election, which is 15 town meeting rep seats per precinct. So each voter's ballot, which the sample ballots are on the town's website. So each voter's ballot is going to have the town-wide positions and then their precinct town meeting reps to choose.
Okay, so as a town meeting rep, I know that I was able to just run again in my new precinct, whatever number it was, and all the current ones. But I've noticed that in only 3 precincts do we have enough candidates to fill 15 seats. What happens if there are not enough? Clearly, anybody who wants to be a town meeting rep can still work a write-in campaign and get elected. How many votes are required to be elected via a write-in campaign?
Sure. So anyone not printed on the ballot can write a name in. And as long as it meets 15, then it just meets the 15. But if in the event that there are more write-ins than the allotted seats, then the town meeting reps would just vote to appoint in that scenario. And similarly, if we cannot fill the empty seats with the write-ins that we have, then those seats would be appointed by the town meeting reps.
And there is no minimum, I mean, you can win a town meeting seat with 1 vote.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're, so, and the one thing we sort of ask if people are interested in being write-in candidates for town meeting or for any other race, you don't have to, but it's very helpful for us if you contact the clerk's office so that as we're going through the people who have been written in, we know who you are, we know how to reach you in the event that you win a seat. If we don't know how to get in touch with you, it's very difficult for us. So again, if people are interested in being considered as write-in candidates and they're sort of letting their friends and neighbors know that they are throwing their names into the hat, it would be very helpful if they would just let us know. So when we see their name on the ballot, we know how to get in touch with them.
Okay, great. And I would just note that precincts 2, 3, and 11 have enough candidates to fill all the seats. But in every other precinct, there's in some of them as many as 7 seats available that you could get via write-in campaign. So anybody out there who's still thinking about it, here's your chance without having to traipse around and get 25 signatures to get on the ballot. And I would also note that we also have spaces on planning board and the housing authority. There's only one candidate running for 2 seats on the planning board and nobody running for the seat on the housing authority. So I'm sure these can be filled also with write-in votes. Not the best way to do it, but certainly to get it filled. And it would be good to have 165 elected town meeting reps. Okay, let me see. Relative to town meeting reps, there are a number of ballot questions I noticed on the ballot this year. And one of which related to, you're saying people can get elected with 1 write-in vote now. One of the ballot questions would change that to 10, a minimum of 10 votes in order to get on the ballot.
I know, but that's not to win. That's, So I know this gets a little confusing. So you still, even if this question passes, you will still be able to win with 1 vote on the ballot. The significance of question 4 is that in the event of a vacancy, let's say that you're a town meeting rep and you move out of town. So that creates a vacancy. This is the people who sort of go on the list of people who are eligible to fill a vacancy. You can still win a town meeting rep seat, or if you get the most votes, and that is 1 vote, this ballot question does not change this. Okay. The ballot question number 4 only deals with filling vacancies that occur during the term of a town meeting rep's incumbency. So it's not getting on the ballot initially, it's who's eligible to fill a vacancy. Okay, so the list for filling vacancies would be made up of only people who had at least 10 votes. Yes.
Along the way. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously that's helpful to be clarifying because I didn't know what it meant.
Okay, it's not, and it's really kind of in the weeds, and so, but yeah, I'm glad you actually asked that question because yeah, you absolutely, if you get the most votes and that number of votes is 1, you win. Okay. Regardless of this ballot question. Okay, I'm looking at my questions. What else did I have? We've talked about the new precincts and how they are aligned or not aligned with our state representative districts. So. So now we know who we're voting for. Let's talk about voting. Are the COVID rules still in effect? The ones that had no excuse absences, early voting, etc. I think those expired. What are the rules for and what's happening with the legislation that I know has been before the state legislature regarding voting rules?
We were really hoping that they were going to extend no excuse voting by mail, but unfortunately, as of today, they have not. So as of the date of this session, no excuse voting by mail has expired. The state legislature did not pass an extension to the temporary state laws that allowed no excuse voting by mail in 2020 and 2021. So right now, absentee voting is still what is available for those who qualify. And so if anyone is not familiar with or aware, to qualify for absentee voting, you need to either be away from your city or town on election day, or have a disability that keeps you from voting at your polling place, or have a religious belief that prevents you from voting at your polling place on election day.
Okay, and there's also no early voting, is that correct, for the town election?
Not for the town election.
Okay.
The state hasn't passed any legislation about that. So far, the only one that we're aware that you can vote early in is just the November.
It's a November election, but we do anticipate further action in advance of the primary
Okay.
regarding early voting and vote by mail. Mary, I just wanted to point out one thing that connected to what Marie was saying, that again, we were very hopeful that the legislature would pass no excuse vote by mail in advance of this election. And in our enthusiasm and our optimism, we did include a application. However, we did word it so that it is clear that you can use this for any election in which vote by mail, no excuse vote by mail is authorized. So we do want folks to know that for the town election, there is not, any no excuse vote by mail. Like Maria was saying, the only people who can vote by mail in this election are people who are qualified to vote absentee. So we are hoping people maybe will hold on to this in the hopes that something gets passed before September. And we do know that there is both, early voting in person and vote by mail early voting for the November election, because that is already state law.
Okay, there was a bill passed by the legislature, wasn't there? But not to apply for our local election. Haven't they passed? I know
There's early voting for all state elections. That is all that exists right now. The legislature actually did pass a law allowing early voting for the presidential primary back in March of 2020, but that was a law that only applied to the presidential primary. So right now, the only legislative authorization for early voting and for no excuse vote by mail is for your biennial state elections, which basically means your every 2-year November elections. We're keeping our fingers crossed that that gets extended to the primaries and to other elections.
I know the State League of Women Voters has been working hard with the legislature to get some of these things into law permanently. And I thought there had been some legislation passed, but I may be wrong.
A Senate bill did pass, I believe, back in October or November.
Okay.
And that was when I believe the legislative session was coming to a halt. It got tabled and it has not been picked up yet.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure the league will be pressing to get some action done on that, because I think early voting was very popular, as was no excuse absentee. But for a town election, we're back to the rules that applied before COVID. Okay, only absentee voting under the conditions that Maria read to us, and otherwise we'll see what the polls.
Yes.
At your new polling place. Okay. I think I've covered everything. What haven't I covered that you ladies would like to tell us about? Anything?
We would just encourage people to vote. We get an election takes just as much work, whether it's a presidential election where we anticipate 80 to 82% voter turnout in Chelmsford, or a town election where we are excited if we get 15% voter turnout. This is your tax dollars at work putting on elections. Show up. It's your local government. We're obviously preaching to the choir here, but
actually, I saw a question here, and it's something I did have written down that I failed to ask. What about the dates for registering?
Such a good
registering and for requesting absentee ballots.
Yes. So town election, April 5th, 2022. Polls are always open on election day, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then just to reiterate, if anyone has questions about where they vote, they can utilize the town website or the state's website. The deadline to register to vote for any election is always 20 days before an election. And that, of course, is if you're not already registered to vote. There are people who think that they need to re-register for each election. You only need to register one time. And as long as you haven't signed anything to remove yourself from the voter rolls, you're registered to vote. Responding to the census keeps you active. So respond to your town census. And the deadline to register for our local election on April 5th is actually tomorrow, March 16th, 8 p.m. And I believe if you use the online feature, that actually is available until midnight. So deadline to register for the local election is tomorrow, 8 p.m. Unless you use the online feature, then you can register until midnight online. The deadlines to apply for an absentee ballot to be mailed to you is always 4 business days before an election. So for this local election, the deadline to request an absentee ballot by mail is March 30th, 5 p.m. There is also, you can also vote in person absentee, and that deadline is always noontime, the business day before the election. And so for this local election, if you need to vote absentee in person at the town clerk's office, that's the day before, April 4th, 12 p.m. And we also like to remind people, if you do vote using an absentee ballot by mail, it can be returned by mail using our drop box or in person to the town clerk's office. And that mailed absentee ballots need to be received by the town clerk's office no later than 8 p.m. on election day. Please don't return your voted absentee ballot to your polling location. It needs to be delivered to the town clerk's office and checked in by us before we deliver it to the polls. And the reason why we say business days for, I think, all of the deadlines is because when we have that primary in September, it's actually the day after Labor Day. So any deadline calculations are not including that holiday before the election. But those are all dates that we will also post on the website when it comes closer to that time.
So the important date at this point is, first of all, maybe we haven't said it yet. Election day in Chelmsford is April 5th, Tuesday, April 5th. The last day to register to vote in the local election is tomorrow. And the last day to request an absentee ballot for the local election is March 30th.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep. We need to receive it by 5 p.m. March 30th.
The request for absentee ballot.
The request for an absentee
Okay.
ballot, yeah.
Okay.
And there are forms you can use to apply for absentee ballots, but you do not have to use the form. Any written request with your signature will suffice as long as it is clear that you're requesting a ballot and you're telling us who you are and where you want us to mail the ballot. So any written request signed will suffice.
I saw in chat, we had a question about the ballot questions, and I know there are 4. There are 4 questions. 3 of them have to do with small things, changing the charter around town meeting reps, election of town meeting reps. I can't remember, what's the first ballot question?
Sure. So the first question on the ballot, the back of the ballot, so you need to vote both sides. Questions are on the back. The first question is to amend the town charter, section 3-11, to provide that the 4th member of the housing authority shall be a town-appointed tenant board member in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 121B of the Mass General Laws.
Okay, and then the other ones have to do with election of town meeting reps, or who can be appointed town meeting rep based on the votes they receive.
Question 2, is to amend the charter section, which is to provide that only elected town meeting members may seek re-election within their current precincts by notifying the town clerk's office of the intent to do so by using the appropriate forms supplied by the town clerk.
Okay, can you, Jennifer, you look like you want to explain that.
It is my understanding that this is to clarify and to distinguish between elected town meeting reps who are elected by their precinct, as opposed to appointed town meeting reps who get their seat. Again, let's say we don't fill all 15 seats for any given precinct. Then prior to town meeting, the town meeting reps from that precinct will vote to fill those seats.
Okay.
Those people who fill those seats are not elected town meeting reps. They are appointed. They are not considered candidates for re-election. In the event that they decide to run for a 3-year term following the expiration of their term, they will be going out to collect signatures again. You know, they are not considered incumbents. I mean, they are considered elected incumbents. They are appointed to that position. So this makes clear who it is who's entitled to indicate their desire to run for re-election simply by returning an intent letter.
And the third question, we talked about the last one. The third one is
to amend the town charter section 2-4 to provide that in the event of a tie vote in the office of town meeting member, the town clerk shall, within 7 days of the election, notify elected town meeting members of that precinct of the vacancy, and under the supervision of the town clerk, any such ties shall be broken by ballots cast by the elected town meeting members participating.
okay. And if I remember the discussion at town meeting with regard to that, it had to do a lot with a bunch of people get one vote, one write-in vote, and you need one more town meeting member, and you have 3 people with 1 vote. So it's a way of breaking the tie, and selecting someone. Is that correct? I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
It is that.
I really don't know. I'm going to be honest.
I think
Yeah.
that's, I remember we just, because these all have been approved by town meeting to be put on the ballot, and I think that was the discussion.
Okay.
And another one related to the charter. Will we have to amend the charter? The charter talks about 9 precincts and 162 reps. Are we going to have to amend the charter with these changes in the number of precincts and the number of reps?
Good question. So the answer is no. The charter is written as the calculation, which is that no more than 180 reps total, and that the number must be divisible by 3.
Okay.
So our new 165
Okay.
qualifies under what our charter says.
I guess I didn't have a good reading on the charter. Good. I wondered, you mentioned that 180 before, and I wondered where that came from. Okay. So we're good to go with changes in the number of precincts and changes in the number of town meeting reps.
Right.
To be divisible by the number, or a multiple of the number of precincts. Okay. Anything else? Are there any other questions out there?
I'm just going to, so Maria did make the point that you don't have to re-register for every election. The one thing we really want to encourage people to do is if you have moved, you re-register at your new address. If your name has changed, you re-register under your new name. Those things do not happen automatically. We have, obviously we have automatic voter registration. So when you go to the registry of motor vehicles and you change the address for your driver's license, you're going to show up in our queue to change your voter registration address. But you need to take some action to change your address with your voter registration or to change your name with the voter registration. So again, if there are any people out there for whom that is an issue, then make sure to go onto the Secretary of State's website, see where you're currently registered. If you're not registered at the right place, make sure to fix that before midnight tomorrow on the Secretary of State's website. Or in our office. We'll actually be in the office until 8 p.m. tomorrow to accept in-person voter registrations or in-person changes. So,
okay, that's good to know. And I guess you mentioned it, but I will reinforce too. When you get that census form, be sure you fill it out, because having worked the polls and people come in and say, why am I not on the list? Why am I inactive? And the reason in a lot of those cases is they haven't filled out the census form.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
so it's just such an easy thing to do, to fill it out, put it in the mail, and keep your registration active. Okay, anything else? Anybody else have questions? If not, I'm going to thank Maria and Jennifer for a very informative evening, and encourage everyone to vote. And along that line, I want to announce that the League of Women Voters of Chelmsford will be hosting their annual candidates forum on Thursday, March 24th. That's next week, Thursday night. We'll be at the McCarthy School Auditorium beginning at 7 p.m. And Chelmsford Telemedia will be televising. It will be live. It will be televised live, but you're welcome to join us at McCarthy for as long as, since the COVID rules have loosened up and we can gather in one place, and it's a pretty big venue to do this in. We'd be happy to have people come and join us for our candidates night, March 24th, 7 p.m. And if Jessica's still there, I think we've covered everything.
I am
Thank you,
still
Mary.
here. I'm
Thanks
sorry.
for
I'm just
having
trying. No, sorry. I am still here. I'm just trying to share your website. But yes, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much to Jennifer and Maria and to Mary. This was a wonderful, very informative. We've got some comments in the chat saying how informative this was and how helpful this was. I have shared a bunch of links in the chat as you were watching, as you were talking. I'm going to save those, and this recording will go out to everybody tomorrow with all of those links so that they can contact you further if they have questions.
Can I just have a couple more, and a couple of my league members have chimed in, chatted in with, asking people to think about joining the League of Women Voters, and it's not for women only. We welcome men, would love to have more members. And the other thing is, if you have questions for candidates, for candidates night, you could submit those ahead of time to the league at League of Women Voters Chelmsford. Let's see, LWV Chelmsford @gmail.com. So anyone who has a question they'd like to have answered, Phoebe has it up in the chat, LWV@gmail.com. So any questions you'd like us to ask the candidates on candidates night, you can submit them ahead of time. And maybe now I'm done.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time tonight to do this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you for organizing, Mary and Jessica.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.